Welcome to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman here with Ryan D'Amico. We'll move from there into our season review, and we're going to go look through division by division here on some of our predictions coming into the season, how the season actually went, and some of the things coming up for each of the teams that we'll get to. And we'll start in the AFC East. Top of that division is the Patriots here in the Super Bowl, who went 13-3 this season, which, before it started, both of us correctly predicted. We went through and made predictions for every single team, and we both had the Patriots as a 13-win team. We also both had them going to the Super Bowl early on. We connected that with some other wrong predictions as well. We're not quite some kind of super fortune tellers or anything like that, but this is a good start here that we both saw them being good. And it's a very similar story where they've got Tom Brady. He's an incredible player. They kind of build around him. They fill in with some different pieces, and they continue to be at the top of the league there. And I expect that to continue as long as Tom Brady's coming back.
Yeah, no, and as long as Brady and Belichick are there, I mean, it's the same old song and dance with the Patriots. If they're there, they're going to have a shot to play for the Super Bowl every year. I mean, just the way it is. And until they move on to greener pastures or retire or whatever it is, Patriots are going to be relevant. And the Patriots are going to be kings of that division. I mean, I think – I don't know if I said this on the show or off the show talking to you one week, but, like, not to take anything away from the Patriots, but, like, Christ, they've had the easiest division for the last 15 years. Like, the Dolphins, Jets, and Bills are, like, never good. Like, they're never good. The Jets had those, like, 2 years, I remember, with Sanchez when they went to the AFC Championship game. Mm-hmm. Other than that, the Bills, this is the first year they made the playoffs since 1999, for Christ's sakes. We were 10 years old. And the Dolphins, they're underachievers every year. This is the year they're going to get to the playoffs. 7-9. I mean, that's just the way they are. So, I mean, they've had, like, the easiest division. They're pretty much guaranteed 5 or 6 wins every year just because their division's so terrible.
Yeah, and this – comparatively speaking, this is one of the better years for their division where they actually had another playoff team come out of there with the Buffalo Bills. And that'll be the next team we move to. Both of us expected them to be below 500. They kind of surprised in that sense, although they more so surprised themselves. They went through that period benching Tyrod Taylor, trying the Nathan Peterman experiment, putting Tyrod Taylor back in. Just a weird combination of decisions. And somehow, they were able to sneak into the playoffs thanks to the Ravens falling flat on their faces against the Bengals there. This is a team, like, it's the same story going into next year. There's nothing I'm very excited about on this team except LaShawn McCoy and how good he is. And I don't know. It's hard to say. He's getting older. We don't know how long he'll be around, how long he'll want to play for the Bills if they're not a playoff team, if they're not any good. So they have a lot of question marks what they'll fill in. Tyrod Taylor is supposed to be a free agent here, so they could have a brand new quarterback next year. They've got a lot of holes throughout that roster that need filled in. So this team, I would be amazed if they made the playoffs again next year. I would be confident putting a guarantee that they don't.
Yeah, no, I probably would as well, Zach. And, you know, they were just the beneficiary of a down AFC. I mean, the AFC was so down this year that 2 subpar teams were going to make the playoffs. Yeah. And that's just the way it was. And it was the Bills and it was the Titans. Mm-hmm. Bills looked terrible against the Jaguars, couldn't score at all. And the Titans were getting killed, and thanks to Andy Reid and his great playoff coaching, shit the bed and let the Titans come back. But, I mean, both of those teams, I think everyone would agree, didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. So they're just a beneficiary of a down AFC. That's all I'm going to say about them, because they're nothing special. And had the AFC been the normal kind of, you know, the wild card teams or 10-win teams, 11-win teams, They're not even talking about the Bills.
Right. And this is a team, like you mentioned with that, they don't have much to build around. Like LaShawn McCoy, he's been around for a long time. He's definitely getting older. They don't have – I can't tell you one exciting young player they have. Like Zay Jones was one of their top picks this past season.
He's not someone you can build around, yeah.
No, he had a very disappointing season. He was one of the most inefficient receivers in the league with the percentage of balls that he caught that were thrown to him. It was extremely low. I know it was one of the lowest in the leagues. He was one I've been keeping track of because I have him in a dynasty league, but just didn't do much at all except for the 2 games, I think it was, where he got in the end zone. So they're just an ugly team that they have for him there that I would be surprised if they continue having any success. And then we'll finish out with the bottom of the division there with Miami after a 6-win season, and the Jets having a 5-win season. The Jets, I know I expected them to have 0 wins, so they overperformed comparatively. You said they'd have 2 there. We both had Miami just under 500, which is about what they finished there with their 6 wins. Biggest thing for the Dolphins is Ryan Tannehill coming back. So it'd be interesting to see for Dolphins fans if he can do anything, if he can change that. But they did so poorly handling Jarvis Landry last year, trying to not give him an extension, avoiding it, whatever they were doing. So he's going to be a free agent. He's one of their top players. They have a very below average team, and I don't really see it getting much better.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have to put Jake Cutler as your quarterback the entire year, I mean, let's be real. Probably not going to have a very good season. And they didn't. And you're right. They handled the Jarvis Landry situation terribly. I thought they handled the Jay Ajayi situation terribly. I mean, trading your best running back, one of your best offensive players for a 4th round I think it was a 4th, either a 3rd or a 4th. I want to say it was a 4th round pick.
I'm almost positive it was 4th.
And when the team you trade him to is in the Super Bowl and he's killing it, yeah. I'm not sold on Adam Gase. And I'm really not sold on him. It was cute in the beginning to send a message and be like, if you don't try hard, I'm benching you. It's like, that's cute and all, if you're coaching middle school or high school, but this is the NFL, dude. I hate to break it to you, but that's just the realization of the NFL. You're going to have guys that are unhappy because they're not getting the football. You're going to have guys that quit on you in the 4th quarter one week. That's just going to happen. And you can't just trade everyone away and say, look, this is what happens if you don't do things my way. So I'm really not sold on Adam Gase. I'm really not. And as far as the Jets go, look, I'd tip my hat to what's their head coach's name, Zach? Help me out here.
Todd Bowles.
Todd Bowles, thank you. Todd Bowles. I took my hat to Todd Bowles because, like you said, I don't think anyone out there would have expected them to win as many games as they did. And they did. And they had a nice year, and we're in a lot of games. I mean, and the games that they lost, they were in a fair share of them. So you got to think that the future's bright with them. I mean, if they can get their hands wrapped around a good quarterback, which I know has been the big missing piece the last handful of years. I mean, if they can get their hands wrapped around a quarterback, if they can somehow lure Kirk Cousins to come to New York, big market, you're going to be the face of New York. If they can get something like that to happen, I mean, great. I mean, I'm not sure what draft pick they have. I want to say it's 7, somewhere around there. I mean, let's see kind of what how the draft plays out. I mean, maybe you get one of them quarterbacks to fall for you. You never know. I mean, we saw Aaron Rodgers fall into the 20s the year he was drafted. So, I mean, maybe they get someone to fall to them in the draft, but they got to get their hands wrapped around a quarterback. But I definitely think things are moving in the right direction for the Jets.
I agree. And they've drafted pretty well the last couple of years. They have kind of a foundation of some good young players, especially on the defensive end of the ball. They took the 2 safeties this past year. And it'll be my biggest hope with them is that they don't just blow all their cap space on some Case Keenum kind of leftover quarterback after other quarterbacks go to better playoff potential teams, and they just end up using their cap on someone that just is a waste of money to them.
One thing that I've said that I don't understand why teams do it. I mean, I do, but I also don't understand why they don't do it, is so many teams, like, it's such a win now league for owners and for general managers. Like, it's so like, we got to win now. We got to win now. And so many times you see these teams either overpaying for a middle tier quarterback or drafting a quarterback high just to draft one and hope they hit on him. Like, if there's not someone out there that you think is worth $100 million, or you think that's worth your first round pick, then guess what? Don't take them. Like, yeah, it's going to suck that you're going to go 3-13 next year. Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah, that sucks. I get that. Yeah, attendance might be down again. But you got to build yourself for the future and not set yourself back. And that's what Cleveland's doing. I mean, how many quarterbacks has Cleveland taken to where, I mean, anybody could have seen that, look, those guys weren't going to work. I mean, Brandon Weeden was not a franchise quarterback. Johnny Manziel was not a franchise quarterback. I mean, they've taken so many guys that clearly are not franchise quarterbacks just to take them and hope by the grace of God that they work out. And I don't think teams should do that. If it was me, and look, I had a guy I was totally in on, I have no problem doing it. But I mean, if I'm not 100% sold on a guy, whether it's the free agent market, whether it's the draft, I'm not taking one. I'm saying, okay, there's a guy next year, two guys next year that, oh, he's a free agent. Oh, he's coming out. Okay, let's try to get him next year. I think if more teams did that, Zach, you'd have more success. But it's such a you gotta win now league that you just don't see it.
Yeah, you see a lot of people just kind of taking the action to win now, almost just to save their job. And it's unfortunate. And a lot of that comes back on the organization that almost promotes that. You see it, I see it in Cleveland, where they just set themselves up to have 2 high first-round picks. They did so well, and they fired the GM. They just –
But did they do well? Because they could have drafted Jared Goff or they could have drafted Carson Wentz. And if they had either one of those guys, you have your quarterback. Now you can build around him. They didn't even think Carson Wentz was a top 20 player in the draft. So, I mean, yeah, they have the 2 top 5 picks now, Zach, but at the same time, they could have had Goff or Wentz and decided not to take them.
I agree, but to your point earlier, if they weren't sold on them, then why draft them? I like the stacking the picks and getting more picks if you're not 100% sold on them.
And then
obviously they were wrong.
Right, but now you got to hit on these picks.
Right.
You got two top 5 picks, 2 top 4 picks. You got the first pick and the fourth. You got to hit home runs with these picks. You miss on these picks, you're setting your team and your organization back years again. They have to hit on these picks.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's not as much on the GM. Like, they have to look other places on why they're failing so bad in the draft for years and years and years and years. It can't be on that one guy. But I loved what he did to stack those picks and be able to bring in so many more, especially that Brock Osweiler trade where he got one for just taking on a guy and then ending up cutting him. So I thought they were moving in the right direction with him, but they kept the 0-16 coach and fired Sashi Khan, the GM. So that's always weird for me to see, where it's like they give these guys a position and then don't trust them to do what they're supposed to do. So as you were saying with the Jets, I don't have much else to add. Just my biggest hope that they don't blow their money on someone not worth it. But from there, we'll move to the AFC North, where the Steelers were at the top of the division. We both thought they'd have 12 wins. They ended up with 13. We were definitely correct. They'd be at the top of their division. I know I questioned Juju Smith-Schuster. I wasn't very confident at all he'd be productive early on, and especially here as a rookie. And he came on and did very well. So it'd be interesting to see what they end up doing with Martavis Bryant, a guy who was definitely dissatisfied with where he's at, and what they end up doing with him. What happens with Le'Veon Bell, who's going to be a free agent here. And what they do with that defense, it really fell apart for him late in the season.
Yeah, look, as far as Martavis Bryant goes, I'd kick him the hell out of town. That dude is such a cancer. That dude thinks he's so much better than he actually is. Like, I'd be like, go somewhere else. Go be a headache for some other organization, especially with Juju Smith-Schuster coming, of age in his rookie year. I'd get rid of Martavis Bryant. Le'Veon Bell, I'll tell you, man, Le'Veon Bell is one of the most irritating players in the NFL. Like, he's such a personally, I think he's such a piece of shit that, like, and does so much dumb stuff, yet he's one of the top 5 players probably in the NFL. So, and that always just bothered me. Like, you're a great player. Like, can't you be a great person too? Can't you, like, show up to practice on time? Can't you, not talk about your contract 2 days before a game is the AFC Championship games go or divisional rounds going on? Like, I mean, really, like, so I'm torn on him. But if I'm the ownership, you got to get him signed. You can't let a guy like that walk. You can't. You got to sign him. Sign him to a long-term deal. You got to lock him up. And the defense, you're right. They got to continue to get that in shape because Shazier's done, who was like the glue on that defense. And you saw it when he went out. That defense really went downhill. So they need to figure out how they're going to work around him not being there anymore. And I think they probably go defense early and often in the drafts. I know I would. I mean, you have tons of skill players and tons of playmakers on that offense.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go defense. And at some point, Zach, they got to think about a quarterback because Landry Jones isn't the guy that's going to step in and take over for the Steelers. So they got to think about a quarterback too. So they got that in the back of their mind.
Yeah, they've got a lot of tough decisions there. I know the defense early on, they seem to be better, but they are playing some poor offenses within that division there with the Ravens, the Browns, and the Bengals, especially this season. And they were fine. They had some good games defensively against those teams, but really, really let them down later in the season. That's something they've got to make adjustments on. And second place in that division this past season was the Ravens, which surprised us both. We both thought they'd be a 6-win team. They ended up being so close to making the playoffs. I thought they had it locked up. All they had to do was beat the Bengals. Couldn't do that. Missed the playoffs. This is a team they're just so at best middle of the pack that it's just not fun to watch. It's not an exciting team in any way. Joe Flacco is just the most overpaid quarterback right now in the NFL. He's taking up a huge amount of their cap space to be an average quarterback. They just have a bunch of old weapons around him. Mike Wallace is going to be a free agent. Jeremy Maclin was there. Danny Woodhead's there. They're all fine players, but nothing to build around on this team. The only thing I'm interested in next year is what happens at the running back position, where they'll have Kenneth Dixon returning from injury. He was thought to be the starter coming into this season. Alex Collins did well for him at running back this past year. So see if they can figure something out there, but they have a lot of holes to fill, and they just have nothing at receiver, and they've been horrible at drafting at the receiver position. Their last first-round pick at receiver was Brashad Perryman, who's just hanging around there at the end of their roster right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, winning that Super Bowl a handful of years ago was the single best thing and the single worst thing that happened to the Baltimore Ravens because, yeah, they got themselves a world championship, which is what you play for, which is great. But Flacco had that insane run in the playoffs that year, and it was his free agent year.
Yeah. And
they're like, well, we got to lock this guy up. I mean, he's turning a corner. He's playing great. Just won a Super Bowl. We got to lock him up. He made him the highest paid player in football, and good God, is he really taking a fall from grace. I mean, he's just an average quarterback at best. I mean, at no point has he shown anything since then that says he's going to be an elite top 10 quarterback. So, and they're locked into him financially, which affects them trying to sign other players. I mean, you kind of seeing it with Drew Brees a lot, where he's taken on such a big amount of money that it's hard for, the Saints and now the Ravens to add pieces around them. They really have to hit home runs in the draft in order to, get the roster up to where it needs to be. So, yeah, the Ravens, look, I don't think they're going to be anything next year. I'll stand by what I said this year. They were another beneficiary of a down AFC year. I think
and an easy schedule. They definitely did not have a strong schedule at all.
Right. So I think they will probably be the same next year, and will not make the playoffs again. That's kind of where I think.
And from there, we go to a 7-win Bengals team. Both of us were actually, I don't want to say excited, but we were a little bit higher.
But the potential
on this offense, yeah, they had some good pieces, but something you questioned from before the season started, they're still stuck with Marvin Lewis at the coaching position there, just not doing anything successful with this team. And they looked ugly at different points throughout this season. I only watched them a couple times. I know I watched them versus the Texans when they had a Thursday night game, and it was a disaster. Andy Dalton looked awful. Their offense looked awful. Their defense looked awful. I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to move ahead of the Ravens next year, because they do have some young pieces that are going to be growing and improving. The Ravens on the other side just seem like they're going to keep on dropping off there. So I could see them a little bit farther ahead. We thought Marvin Lewis might not be back. He's going to be back. So I just – that really limits the potential in this Bengals team.
I got to tell you, dude, I get so tired of talking about the Bengals. Like, if I was a Bengals fan, I'd want to freaking pull my hair out. Like, and I have a lot of hair. I know you guys don't get to see me, but I have a pretty good set of hair up there. So that would suck to pull my hair out, but I would, because I mean, to have to go through another year of this regime with Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton, like, if I'm the ownership, I'm getting rid of Marvin Lewis and I'm getting rid of Andy Dalton. Like, I'm sorry. It's a package deal. You see it a lot in the NFL. I'm getting rid of both. I'm bringing in a new head coach. I'm letting him get his quarterback, and we're moving on. Like, for the amount of talent that they had on offense beginning of the year that we talked about, I mean, for them to be so lackluster, for them to have to fire their offensive coordinator after 2 weeks, like, that's pathetic. Like, that's so pathetic. That organization is so poorly run. It's comical. So the Bengals, I said it before this season, and I'm going to say it again now, and I'll say it again at the beginning of next season. Until they move on from Marvin Lewis, they're going to be bad. It's not going to change.
Yeah, I do not disagree with you in any way. He's not proven much at all there. They do still have some nice pieces. AJ Green's around there. He's one of my favorite players to watch there at the receiver position.
Two best jobs to have in the world, Zach. Weatherman, you get paid to be wrong, and the Bengals head coach, because you can coach forever and not get fired for not winning a playoff game.
Yeah.
He's not won a playoff game. Like, it's astounding to me. Like, oh my God. I'm not even a Bengals fan and I get pissed off about it.
Yeah. And we'll go from there to another inept coach with Hugh Jackson, who's coming back with the 0-win Browns. They just finished this past season 0-16. They did not find a quarterback in any form with all the guys they had rostered at the beginning of the season. With Kaiser, there's the other guy, and Brock Osweiler that were battling out. I don't even remember that other guy's name, but yeah, it was a mess of nonsense. Kaiser looked awful, threw far more interceptions than touchdowns. They just don't have much going. The only thing I'm looking forward to on this team is seeing what Josh Gordon can do in a full season, seeing if he can become an actual star player there. Other than that, they have years of work to do to build this team into anything. Like I mentioned, they put themselves in a good situation when it comes to having the draft picks to do it. They've just got to execute and do something positive with those draft picks, bringing in a quarterback, bringing in some position players around him, bringing in a better defense, better line, better everything except maybe Josh Gordon. I like him.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I don't want to say torn on the Browns, but like, to me, Hugh Jackson's not the problem. Would I want him to be my head coach? No. But, like, at the same time, he really doesn't have anything to work with.
Mhm.
I mean, if you look at their roster. Like, look at the roster that they're trotting out on offense and defense. Like, it's terrible. Like, nobody can win with that. Like,
Right.
and that's why I think you keep him around kind of as, like the scapegoat kind of thing. Like, you be our head coach through these shitty years. Once we get, like, a good roster together, all right, you're done. We're going to bring someone in here that actually wants to coach this team and we think can coach this team well. Because, honestly, if there's a time for the Browns to be set up for success, it's right now. Like we talked about with these draft picks that they have stockpiled. They obviously have to hit a home run with their draft picks. But, I mean, they're set up to be successful in the next 3-4 years. So, it's going to be interesting to see how it works out for them. But I think the GM situation there is a bigger problem than Hugh Jackson because the roster is just dog shit.
Yeah, they've definitely got to make some kind of moves there across the board. So it'll be I'm very intrigued to see what they're able to do in the draft and what positions they end up adding and going for. The concern I'd have with what you're talking about, potentially Hugh Jackson being a scapegoat and being fired after this season or within the next 2 seasons, is a lot of times you see that where a coach drafts a specific player they like for their system and you bring in someone else. You don't want to waste that. They draft a 3-4 outside linebacker and then the next coach wants to go to 4-3, or they draft a quarterback for this system and they want to go to a different system. There's all kinds of concerns with that. That's why I don't like something with him coming back. I think you've got to commit to someone long term and let them build their team. That's the move they've got to be looking for here. It's very rare you see like the Rams did where they were able to have a new coach come in with Jared Goff, who was drafted by a previous regime, and it goes well. But
same thing with the Eagles, Peterson and Wentz. Yeah. Same exact thing. Yep.
Yeah, very true. So it can work out. It'll be interesting to see if they can make that work. So we'll move on to our next division here, where both of us thought Jacksonville would be terrible this year, and they were not. They ended up having their 10-win season, making it the whole way to the AFC Championship game, surprising pretty much everyone, except maybe the most diehard Jacksonville fans. But I think even they would have been surprised there. I know I compared it to the Cowboys going into this season. I didn't expect it at all to be quite like it was. But the Cowboys, the previous year when they drafted Ezekiel Elliott, even though they might have had some other needs, they really relied on him. The Jaguars did something very similar with Leonard Fournette and ended up having huge success, really relying on that running game and that terrific defense there. And I know we talked about it before that we kind of doubt they'll be at the same place going forward. It'll be interesting to see what they can do at receiver. They have Allen Robinson and Marquise Lee, 2 of their top receivers that are going to be free agents. I don't know what to expect with this team, but I do not expect them to win the division so easily going forward.
Yeah, look, good story.
Yeah.
I mean, good story for the NFL. You have a team that's been a 3-win team the last handful of years to going to the AFC Championship game, losing to the Patriots in Foxborough. That's nothing to hang your hat on. If I would have told every Jacksonville fan at the beginning of the year, guess what? You guys are going to have a great year. Go to the AFC Championship game, lose to Tom Brady and the Pats in Foxborough, and that's going to be your year. And, oh, by the way, you're going to play well in that game. I think they'd take it. And, I'd agree with the fact that they definitely probably are going to take a step back. I mean, we talked about this before with the fact that the division's probably only going to get better with the addition of Andrew Luck coming back, and Deshaun Watson will be back next year. So things are going to get difficult there. Plus the schedule expected to be difficult. I mean, you go to the AFC Championship game, they're not going to do you any favors with the schedule. So, Jacksonville, especially sticking with Blake Bortles, the defense obviously will still be good, but I still have questions with that defense because we saw as the competition got better late in the season, it wasn't as locked down as it was against, Jacoby Brissett or Marcus Mariota. So they'll definitely take a step back from next year. If they don't, I'll be really surprised. I really would.
Yeah, I'd love to see them stay up at the top. I love the story.
Yeah, right.
They're fun. They're a fun, entertaining team to watch, but I definitely have my doubts. Although the rest of the division, as we'll get to here, is not anything real exciting to kind of fuel confidence that they'll take over. So we'll actually go bottom to top in this division and move on to the Colts, which even with Andrew Luck supposed to be playing at that point, both of us were down on. Both of us thought they'd be 500 at best. They ended up without Andrew Luck only having a 4-win season. And this is a team that it doesn't have a very good core of players. Frank Gore's going to be a free agent. Marlon Mack's kind of an explosive guy, but he doesn't seem like an every down back that they have there. Andrew Luck, we'll see what he can do when he comes back. And then they have T.Y. Hilton, who's a superstar when they can get him the ball. He very much dropped off without Andrew Luck this season, and their defense looked miserable for most of the season. So I'm still very down on this Colts team. I have a hard time seeing them bounce back unless they make some kind of huge overhaul to that offensive line and the defense.
Yeah, that was the reason I didn't think they'd be good this year, even with Andrew Luck, is because that defense is so bad. I mean, that defense is so bad. The roster is so bad. And, I think they'll attack that part of the football in free agency and in the draft more so than the offensive side. O-line, though, it has to get better. See, they're kind of in a quandary. It's like, do we try to build up the defense because they've been so bad, or do we try to build up the offensive line and protect our superstar quarterback who has been injured the last 2 years? It's like, where do they go? Because they have to pick one or the other. In the NFL nowadays, it's hard to try to overhaul the entire roster. If it was me, I'd pick offensive line. You can't afford Andrew Luck to get hurt again. When he's healthy, he's a great quarterback. No one's going to deny that. I would try to build up that offensive line and go from there. But, yeah, Colts, kind of the year I expected even with Andrew Luck. So we'll be interesting to see how that roster looks next year at the beginning of the year.
Definitely, especially the running back position, because they've got to make some kind of move there with Gore being a free agent without having anything real consistent.
Because they're the number 3 pick, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, Saquon Barkley, maybe. I mean, if the quarterbacks go 1-2, I mean, if the Browns take Darnold or Rosen and then the Giants take the other guy, that means Barkley's available. Why not? I mean, you pair Barkley with a healthy Andrew Luck, and then T.Y. Hilton on the outside. That offense looks pretty sharp now. Fill in some, guys via free agency on the offensive line. That all of a sudden looks like a really nice offense.
Yeah, he's a great player. That would do a lot to kind of masking some of those holes we talked about before with the offensive line and the defense, if they can have a superstar guy in the backfield like him. So from there, we'll move up to the Texans, who both of us expected to be right around 9 wins, on the verge of being in the playoffs. And they had some good moments. Deshaun Watson stepped in. One of your good calls, I know going into the season, Tom Savage was expected to be the starting quarterback. You guaranteed Deshaun Watson would start before week 8, and it was far before that. I believe it was week 2.
Yeah.
He became their starter. You compared Deshaun Watson's situation to Dak Prescott with the Cowboys the previous year as a rookie, with having some weapons already in place around him, and having a team kind of built there. Didn't quite turn out that way, but Watson looked like he's going to be a good player before, unfortunately, having a season-ending injury there that led to their 4-win season to finish off. So I'll be very intrigued to see Deshaun Watson coming back. DeAndre Hopkins is one of the best players in the league to watch, an incredible, incredible athlete. And then I'm intrigued to see what happens at their running back position, where they've got Lamar Miller. He's been around. Deonta Foreman was starting to take carries away from him before his season-ending injury. So that's something that could be in play even more this upcoming year, where he continues to take more and more carries and touches away from Lamar Miller.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson was, playing very, very well. I mean, at such a high level before he got hurt. And I'm surprised we haven't talked about this yet. I guess now's a good time to talk about it. I mean, Zach, this had to be the worst year for injuries to superstar players ever. I mean, the team that you would have trotted out of injured players was like an all-star team. I mean, it really was frightening, the amount of superstar players that got hurt. I mean, it started in the beginning of the year and it went all the way up to the end. And Watson fell into that category because he was playing great football. And this team was going to be on the verge of making the playoffs. And the defense was shaky. Yeah, I mean, they were giving up some, a boatload of points, but Watson was really carrying them. So it's going to be interesting to see how he plays next year. Now that some teams have some film on him, they have kind of a vibe for him. Let's see how he responds off of an injury, and now with teams being able to game plan for him. But they're one of the teams going forward that I'm interested to see how things work out for them, because they have some playmakers there. Let's see how they revamp that defense. But the Texans are one of the teams that I'm going to keep my eye on in the offseason, see what they do in the draft and see what they do in free agency.
Yeah, I agree. After a season like this, I could see them making a run at the playoffs, especially with this division being a little bit weaker compared to some of the other divisions in the AFC.
Yep.
From there, we'll move on to the team we thought would win the division and ended up being a playoff team, which is the Tennessee Titans. They had a solid season, winning 9 games, kind of sneaking into the back end of the playoffs, although one team we've both kind of looked at as not really deserving of the playoffs. Definitely a lesser team than some of the top teams that did not make the playoffs in the NFC. So they've still got a lot of work to do going into next season, especially after Marcus Mariota took a step back this year, threw more interceptions and touchdowns, just didn't look right throughout the season. So hopefully he's able to turn it around and get back to where it looked like he was going last year, as it looked like he was going to be one of the young elite quarterbacks coming up here. Derrick Henry should take over as the number 1 running back exclusively next year. I wouldn't be surprised if they cut DeMarco Murray and move on. And I'm really intrigued to see Corey Davis. He scored 2 touchdowns there in the playoff game against the Patriots. He should be getting some more action as he's becoming more comfortable in an NFL offense, getting more used to Marcus Mariota. I think he could have a nice season next year, and he's someone any kind of Titans fan definitely has to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have pieces that are intriguing and that you think set up well in the long run. Obviously, the biggest question mark is Mariota is, what direction is he going to go in? Is he going to continue to get better, or is he going to continue to take a step back, which is kind of what we saw this year? He's the X factor. I mean, they're going to go as he goes. And you talk about a team that started off great. I mean, I remember they beat the Seahawks in the first couple weeks of the season, and people are like, "Man, this team, wow!" I mean, this is what we were saying they could take a step forward, and they're doing it. And then midway through the year, 3/4 of the way through the year, they just fell apart.
Yeah.
And then, they get rid of their coach, and now Mike Vrabel's their coach, a defensive guy who, I didn't quite understand the hire. I mean, Mike Vrabel, it wasn't that long ago he was still playing in the league. So I'm not so sure I understand that hire, but I'll be honest, they have some players I like, but I don't like the direction that the Titans are going in, that the organization's going in with coaching, with decisions. I don't like the direction they're going in.
I would be surprised next year if they surpass where they are this year. Even in kind of a disappointing season where they've really dropped off, they finished with that 9-win season. I'd be amazed if they make the playoffs next year. I'd be really surprised if they're over 500. I think they're a team that's very well set to be almost the exact same team again next year. So from that point, we'll get to our last AFC division, where one of our most incorrect predictions of the offseason, we both had the Raiders winning the AFC West. Both of us said they'd win double-digit games. Not what happened at all in their 6-win season. They just very unimpressive throughout the season. They had Marshawn Lynch there, which was supposed to be a bigger shift for them. I'll be interested to see what happens with him going forward to next year. If he does come back, if he's going to play for the Raiders again, what the deal is with him. He was still solid throughout the year, but they had a major drop-off from Derek Carr and Amari Cooper that really hurt them. Both of those guys took a significant step back, especially Carr. I felt like that hurt him more so, and that affected Cooper some there. But he had a lot of problems with drops. I know Michael Crabtree is a guy I love on that team, but he's getting up there in age. He's not going to be around for a lot longer. This is a team that's kind of in a weird position after a disappointing season like that. And it's hard to say what they can do to bounce back to what we thought they were going to be as a young up and coming team. I have my doubts on this team being able to be good now.
You took the words out of my mouth, man, and I'm glad that that's the way you feel, because I feel the same way. I think the Raiders, at this point last year, fans, media, myself, probably feeling really good about the Raiders, the direction they were moving in. You got a nice head coach in Jack Del Rio who's been around the block, seemed to be doing some good things with that team. They started to draft well. Carr had a nice year. And then you get to this year, and Carr takes a big, big drop-off. It's not for a lack of playmakers. They have playmakers on that offense. They stacked the offensive line. He just wasn't getting it done. The defense, okay. Now all of a sudden, you fire Del Rio. You bring in John Gruden, who I'm just not impressed with. And you give him $100 million for what? For what? He won a Super Bowl in Tampa with Tony Dungy's roster. Yeah. Okay. Comes after that, his record after that and the years after that was right around 500. And then every year, the last 6 years, people are like, is Gruden going to come back? Boy, I'd love for Gruden to be the head coach. Why? What for? He's an average coach who won one Super Bowl with another guy's roster. So I don't like where the Raiders are at. And if I was a Raiders fan, I'd be upset from where you were at this point last year to where you are now. I just have a bad feeling that things aren't going to go well for the Raiders. It's just an uneasy feeling about that team right now, man.
Yeah, I just cannot imagine Gruden goes in there, who he's had some success, but I can't picture him going in there and having immediate success of turning this team around, which is almost what they need with some older guys like Marshawn Lynch and Michael Crabtree. And I really have a hard time envisioning this specific team being able to do much more. They've got to make – I'm sure he'll make some changes, but right. This is a tough division too. We talked about it at the beginning of the year. We thought this was going to be the most competitive division. Didn't quite turn out that way. But even a team like the Broncos that had a terrible year, they still have a very good defense there in Denver. So it's going to be a hard road for this Raiders team if they want to ever achieve anything close to what last year promised. So from our worst call in that division of the Raiders, and we also both thought they would be in the AFC Championship game against the Patriots. Clearly right on the Patriots, clearly wrong on the Raiders. But from there, we go to our best prediction, which each of us had the Chiefs winning 10 games, and the Chiefs won 10 games. Both of us thought the Raiders would win that division, but since the Raiders had that drop-off, the Chiefs are the ones that ended up taking that. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens since they have now traded Alex Smith away to the Redskins and will now have Pat Mahomes as their number one quarterback there with a very similar team. And they'll get back one of my favorite players in the NFL, Eric Berry, will return from an early injury he had this season that put him out for the entire season. He's really the leader of that defense, and the defense had some struggles without him during the year. So it'll be exciting to see Pat Mahomes. Kareem Hunt will be back, and hopefully even a little bit better. He went through that stage where they just stopped giving them the ball. Hopefully they learned their lesson as they got better once they gave him the ball again. But they have a lot to look forward to. I'm excited for this Chiefs team.
Yeah, they have a nice roster. I mean, they do. Obviously, it all depends on Pat Mahomes and how how's he going to perform. I mean, this is going to be his first year as starting quarterback. Let's see how he can perform. He has talent around him. I mean, the skill positions with obviously Kareem Hunt, like you said, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. He has a good core in place, and the defense is a good core in place as well, especially getting Eric Berry back, like you mentioned. He's the heart and soul of that defense. That'll help. To me, though, the issue is Andy Reid. I mean, until they move on from Andy Reid, they're going to just be what they've been. I mean, that's what Andy Reid is. I saw it for 13 years with the Eagles. He's a good coach. He'll get you to the playoffs, but he's not going to win you a Super Bowl. He's just not. I'm sorry. Someone, I forget who it was, and I wish I remember who it was, and he described Andy Reid perfectly. I mean, perfectly. He's a 6-day-a-week coach. He game plans great. He gets his team ready. But coaching during the game, he's terrible. I mean, clock management. I mean, once his first 15 scripted plays are done, he gets into these lulls offensively. He doesn't commit to the running game like you just mentioned with getting away from Kareem Hunt for 7 games this year. Like, they're not going to win with Andy Reid. And I think it's a shame that he's their head coach because they have talent to be able to win. And I think, look, he's a good quarterback groomer, and I think he'll be good for Patrick Mahomes. But at the end of the day, I still just don't think he can win with Andy Reid as your head coach.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they'd get past where they were this year. I could see them in a similar record with the different quarterback. I could even see them winning a playoff game depending how things go with Pat Mahomes there at quarterback. But I don't see it getting past that point because they should have beaten the Titans. They just
because of Andy Reid though. That's why they lost.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I would love to see them get another receiver to go opposite Tyreek Hill that really stands out. I think that's one of the things that could push them forward and be a big move for them. They never really seem to do that. The last time we've seen that was Jeremy Maclin when they went out and got him from Philly after Andy Reid came over.
You mean Andy Reid doesn't like to go out and get big time receivers? Oh, there's a shocker. I saw it all the time with the Eagles. Right. And guess what? The one year they went to the Super Bowl. Surprise, surprise. So, one thing I learned about Andy Reid, though, Zach, he's a stubborn dude. He is stubborn. It's his way. He wants to do it his way, and he's not going to change. So, but I agree with you. I think they should get a receiver, but we'll see.
Yeah, so it seems kind of doubtful there with Andy Reid, but that would be huge for a second-year quarterback like Mahomes, who hasn't got much playing time at all this season. So we'll go from that one where we both called it right to the next team, which we both disagreed on, and you got exactly right. The Denver Broncos, I thought they'd be mediocre with their great defense, even with a poor quarterback play. You were very confident, on the other hand, they would be last in the division, which is exactly what happened. They had a 5-win season. They started out 3-1 and then just dropped off and were terrible. They had 8 straight losses from that point and just never got close to recovering there. I think the defense is still a very good defense. Maybe not as elite as it was in other years, but it's still not close to the problem. The problem is the quarterback play. They got good action from C.J. Anderson this past year. They've got some good receivers with Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Demaryius Thomas, who are getting a little bit older now. They're both over 30. So they have a smaller time window. This is a team that needs a veteran quarterback, I feel like. And hopefully, for their sake, it doesn't end up being them overspending on one of these kind of mediocre guys where they have to bring in a Sam Bradford or a Case Keenum and really overpay him, or Josh McCown, who just had a good season. I just don't see them as what they need. I think I would love to see Kirk Cousins there. I think he's a good fit. They need someone to really stand out at that quarterback position to help them get back to any kind of relevance.
Yeah, and that's kind of what was my reasoning behind picking them finishing in last place, because I thought the quarterback position was so bad that it would just be a trickle-down effect and make everything else worse. And, with the quarterback and the offense being so bad, it's keeping the defense out there for a longer period of time. And, they eventually will get tired. And that's what happened. And it was just a bad year for them. But they are in a kind of win. They kind of have a win-now roster still. I agree with you. And, I mean, if they don't get Kirk Cousins, I'm not sure what other direction there is to go. I mean, he's the only, truly proven quarterback out there that you feel comfortable bringing in and saying, okay, he can help us win now. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater, no. Case Keenum, no. Sam Bradford, no.
Josh McCown,
no. I mean, the list goes on. And if they swing and miss at Kirk Cousins, then what do you do? So it's going to be interesting because Elway knows what he needs. I mean, he was a quarterback. He knows that they need to get a quarterback. So, in my opinion, it might be at the top of the list. If not, it's definitely top 3 of most interesting storylines in the offseason is the quarterback position for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, that definitely will be interesting to see, especially with such an elite, well, not elite, but one quarterback available that's so far ahead of everyone else with Kirk Cousins there that everyone else is mostly a journeyman.
It's crazy to think that, and it's crazy to think that Kirk Cousins he's about to be the highest paid player in the NFL. I mean, if you had told me that when he was at college playing at Michigan State, if you would have been like, dude, see that guy? One day he's going to be the highest paid player in the NFL. I'd have laughed in your face. I might still be laughing. Look, here we are. So NFL is such a timing league, isn't it? Like it's such a timing league. Like depending on who's a free agent, how well you played the year before. Like it's just, I mean, so we just talked about with Flacco, like having that great of a year. The year he was a free agent, got him all that money. Now you're seeing it with Kirk Cousins. It's such a timing league when it comes to free agents.
It certainly is. You see it all the time with guys like an Albert Hainsworth. He has a monster year, gets a monster contract, and just drops off. Or Kenny Britt that we talked about earlier. Right. Got a huge contract and drops off. Or quarterbacks that make it to the Super Bowl. Immediately I thought of Matt Ryan last year that had an anomaly year. Or Cam Newton, the year the Panthers went to the Super Bowl with him when he had, 46 touchdowns in a season? Something absurd that's not going to be repeatable. So, yeah, it is such a timing year that everything's got to come together at the exact time that it's needed to. So we'll touch on one more team in the AFC, which is the Chargers. You thought they'd sneak in as a playoff team. I thought they'd just miss the playoffs. So they were right on the verge. They gave themselves a chance after a rough start, losing some very, very close games early on, which ultimately led to them not quite making the playoffs. This is a team I'm excited for next year. I know you were excited going into this year about them. They've got a full season of Keenan Allen, healthy. They know he can do that now. They're still exactly the same with Melvin Ingram at the running back position. I think Hunter Henry is going to take a step forward. I don't know what to expect. We had 2 high first round receivers this year that did basically nothing. The first was John Ross with the Bengals that we didn't even really touch on much at all, but he did basically nothing at all this season. And the second one is Mike Williams for this Chargers team. So that could be beneficial if he steps up, if he becomes something that they can rely on this next season. But they're basically returning the same team that should have been a playoff team this year.
Yeah, and it's funny because if they had a capable kicker in the first 4 weeks of the season, they were a playoff team. So just goes to show you how important having a kicker is. I mean, it's the position that you hope doesn't get talked about because you hope he just makes his kicks and no one talks about him. But the Chargers unfortunately weren't in that situation, and the kicking game cost them. But look, the roster for San Diego, and that's the reason I was so high on them last year, is the roster is great. I mean, the roster is really good. And I mean, Melvin Gordon was really banged up last year and still had a decent year, but he was I remember battling through some injuries last year. I mean, every week he was on the injury report. So hopefully you get him being back healthy this year, and Rivers and Allen and a guy I really liked and had in a couple fantasy leagues, Hunter Henry, I think is turning into a really nice player. And then the defensive line is great.
Yeah.
The defensive line is fantastic. And if they can build up around that, continue getting the secondary some help and whatnot, this is definitely a team that can continue to take a step forward. I think this is a team that, can definitely get into the playoffs. I think the Chargers are going to make the playoffs next year. I think that. I think this year they got close. We're so close. I think they're going to sneak in next year because I think they'll get a wild card spot. I think they're going to get a wild card spot. Maybe even they win the division. I mean, Pat Mahomes, rookie quarterback, who knows? Raiders, they're in a quandary like we talked about. And the Broncos, if they swing and miss the quarterback position, this could be San Diego. I still say it.
I know, it's tough.
This could be LA's division to win.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening as well. You mentioned some of the weaknesses in other areas. I think depending on the health of Melvin Ingram, I think that's a huge thing that if he gets hurt, it's going to be tough for him. And also we didn't even mention Casey Hayward, their superstar defensive back too, that just made the Pro Bowl. So they've got some great pieces on that team, and very possible with some of the other weak points in that division. We'll move from there into the NFC, and we'll start with our favorite team heading into the year to take the NFC, the Seattle Seahawks, who didn't even make the playoffs.
Yeah, crazy. What a down year.
Yeah, very down year. Couldn't get anything from the running game. It'll be interesting to see what they're able to do with that going into next year. Russell Wilson, incredible superstar. He's such a good player for that team, but they're potentially going to lose Jimmy Graham here in free agency. They had a lot of injuries on the defensive end. The defense is clearly not what it's been in past years. This is a team, looking at the rest of their division, it's on the weaker side, and I could see them making a run towards the playoffs, but they have a lot of holes in this team. They've got to fill some holes in this offseason to be relevant again.
Totally agree. I think we're starting to see, and we talked about it before, I think we're starting to see the Seahawks window really starting to close here. I mean, they have a big concern in the offensive line. They have a big concern at the running back position. Defense, I mean, guys are falling apart. I mean, guys are having, career-ending neck injuries, and, Sherman just ruptured his Achilles, and Earl Thomas is battling in. I mean, in the NFL, you only have a certain amount of time with the same roster, same core group of guys. Mm-hmm. Seattle's, I mean, they've been one of the teams in the NFC for a handful of years now. I just think the window's really starting to close. Russell Wilson, great quarterback, obviously, and he's definitely something they can continue to build around. But they just have the feeling of a team that's, on its way out. They really do, and are going to go through some kind of rebuilding years here. Because Russell Wilson, I mean, he's going to be around for a while. He's still young. So they just going to have to figure out how to rebuild around him, because I just think the window with this core group of players that they've had for so long is just starting to close.
Yeah, I'd agree. And they tried to make a lot of short-term moves the last couple of years to try and give him that edge. Most of them have not worked out. I think specifically at the running back position, where they brought in someone like Eddie Lacy, didn't work at all.
What a bum he is.
Yeah, just could not get anything out of that running back position was miserable. Every time I watched that team. Mike Davis had a couple nice runs where he shook some guys pretty good. He's a quick guy, so he might be someone that stays on the roster and gets some action, but they definitely need some kind of number one running back there, as well as a lot of other help across the board on that team. So from who we thought was going to be the number one team in that division to who actually was, although both of us thought they'd be terrible once again because they are the Rams, and the Rams have had all kinds of struggles, but quite the bounce back season for them now that they're out from Jeff Fisher, who's just king of mediocrity and just below that. But they ended up winning 11 games this season, taking the division. They're a team that's very well built. A lot of young players. Their biggest free agent coming up is Sammy Watkins, who I think they're fine if he stays. I think they're fine if he goes. It's not going to make a huge difference to them. They'd probably like to have him still because they gave up some good stuff in the trade for him. But they've really had some of those young guys step up. Robert Woods looked good this year. Jared Goff looked good after looking awful the previous year. Todd Gurley bounced back well. Do you think this is repeatable for them to be at the top of the division, to have double-digit wins?
Yeah, I do. I really like the Rams and kind of how they're built. And look, when I'm wrong about something, I come out and say I'm wrong. I have no problem doing that, and I've been wrong plenty of times for sure. I couldn't have been more wrong about Jared Goff. Coming out of college, I was not high on Goff at all. I thought it was laughable that the Rams traded up to get him. And I just thought he was a product of an air raid system at Cal, putting up big numbers because of that. And then you saw him 2 years ago in his rookie year under Fisher look terrible. And I'm sitting there like, not a surprise to me. I told you so. And then they get rid of Fisher, and that saved his career. And you bring a guy like Sean McVay in, who has had success with Kirk Cousins and younger quarterbacks, and he has been a godsend for Jared Goff. And that's just a very good matchup they have there. It's a very good match between McVay and Goff, and I think it'll only continue to get better and whatnot. But I just like the way their roster's constructed. You got Gurley, you got Goff, you got some pretty decent playmakers there. The defense has played really well this year. Kind of had some injuries late in the year. Aaron Donald's a man amongst boys. So yeah, I definitely. If it was me and I was handicapping this division next year, I'm putting them as the favorite, not Seattle.
Yeah, I could definitely see this. This Rams team definitely has a great foundation there.
And think about when they move into a new stadium in a couple of years too. I mean, Christ, they don't even have a home field advantage right now playing at the Coliseum. I mean, so let's see them get a home field advantage. And yeah, didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah,
that's fine. So the next team we'll get to, I was surprised the Cardinals had 8 wins without Carson Palmer for most of the year, without David Johnson for almost the entire year, and they were still able to be a 500 team. This is a team right now, they don't have a quarterback going into next year. So that'll be important for them, but they're another team that could really benefit from having a veteran quarterback come in, someone like Kirk Cousins. I feel like they'd be all right bringing in, as long as they don't overspend, but bringing in one of those other lower tier guys of a Case Keenum or Josh McCown, something like that to kind of hold them over, where David Johnson's still good. They have Larry Fitzgerald's he should be back again. I don't think it's quite guaranteed yet, but they have some good pieces along that team. They've got All-Pro Patrick Peterson there on the defensive side. They've had a solid defense. They have a good solid team set up. They just are completely empty at that quarterback position.
Yeah, they're an interesting team. They I almost want to say they did themselves a disservice by winning so many games, because now they, can't get one of those top end, quarterbacks in the draft. But at the same time, it's like, okay, they were able to win 8 games without Carson Palmer. How many games could they win next year with, Kirk Cousins or, one of those middling guys like you were mentioning, and if Fitzgerald decides he wants to come back for another year, I know he's on the fence with that. You get David Johnson back, defense has some playmakers. They're an interesting team. I'll tell you what, if I was a GM there right now, I'd be having a lot of sleepless nights figuring out which direction I wanted to go. Because they're really on the fence. Do you try to rebuild with the quarterback, or do you try to get the, put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole? Like which way do you go? So they got their hands full there in Arizona.
And one of the options, I could see them kind of doing both, like the Bears did poorly last year, but where they sign a veteran quarterback and draft someone lower in the first round, maybe in the second round, something like that, and try and develop them.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we saw the Bears do it where they've got a $15 million a year backup quarterback in Mike Glennon while Mitch Trubisky's their starter. So I don't like seeing that, but if they were going to have someone like Case Keenum actually start for him for a year or two while the young quarterback they're developing is getting better, learning the NFL game, learning the playbook, things like that, that could be an interesting combination that I think would fit this Cardinals team pretty well.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I think Keenum could be a nice fit. I mean, similar situation to what he had in Minnesota this year. I mean, playmakers around him on offense, a pretty good defense, doesn't have to do it all. I definitely think that could be a nice little fit. And then you draft a guy. I kind of like that option.
Yeah. And the last team in this division is the 49ers. The biggest number one offseason note for them is re-signing Jimmy Garoppolo. They were a winless team until he came around there for him. They made that trade. He finished out the season well, got him to 6 wins, which is right around where we thought they'd be this season with Brian Hoyer as their starting quarterback there at the beginning of the season. But Garoppolo looks like he could be their quarterback of the future. That's kind of what I'm expecting. That's what a lot of people are expecting. So even though he's a free agent, I'd be very, very surprised if he moves anywhere else. Next year, they'll also have Pierre Garçon coming back. He had an injury for the season. They'll have Joe Williams, a guy they really liked at the running back position that they drafted. He was out for the season. So he'll be back, given some attempt to take some touches away at the running back position. And then Carlos Hyde's a free agent. That could be interesting if they don't bring him back. I could see him going and being a significant player on a top-end team, kind of like LeGarrette Blount did this year going to Philly. I could definitely see Carlos Hyde filling that role and being a reliable player on a team like that.
San Francisco is, in my opinion, one of the best suited teams going into free agency and into the offseason this year. I mean, they have their quarterback of the future.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to re-sign him. I mean, I doubt that they traded for him without like a principle in place. Like, hey, we're going to trade for you. We want to re-sign you long-term. You good with that in the offseason? Yes, great. Okay, let's pull the trigger. So I expect him to be there. Now they can just build around him, and that's how you win. You get your quarterback and you build around them, and that's what they're going to be able to do. They're going to be doing it in the draft, and they can be doing it free agency because I'm pretty sure they have a decent amount of cap space because, I mean, they didn't have a lot of high, big name players on that team. So they're set up really nicely, in my opinion, going forward.
I'd agree. And one other guy I like on that team is a rookie from this past year, tight end George Kittle. I think he's a long-term guy for him. He had some good games there, and they're in a good position with some of the young guys they have to build around. Some of the defensive players they've added over the last couple years, especially high picks. So from there, we'll head to the NFC East and talk about both our teams there. Both of us expected the Cowboys to take that division, although we both did anticipate them regressing from the previous year where they won 13 games. I thought they'd win 10. You had them at 11. They dropped down to 9 and completely missed the playoffs. One of my biggest mistakes early on, I laughed at you when you thought the Eagles would be second in the division. I thought that was outrageous. Completely wrong on that.
Yes,
Eagles made
yes, you were.
quite the move. Yep. Not one of my good calls there. I know I questioned their receivers. I thought they were very injury prone, didn't think they'd make it through the season.
Look, you weren't the only one. So
yeah.
You weren't the only one.
Definitely. But huge respect to them for proving me wrong there and taking the division. So we'll actually start with the Cowboys there. I expected them to take that regression based on their defense. I felt like their defense played far better than what they actually were the previous year, and they dropped back to more so what they actually are this year. And we also saw what they are when they can't rely on Zeke Elliott that consistently. I think they'll be back to the playoffs next year with him there for each of the games. I don't think it's a significant improvement. I'd be surprised if it's beyond 10 or 11 wins that they have. But I think they can improve on that 9-win season where Dak Prescott looked really bad at times without Elliott there. They really, really need a lot of help on the defense, especially the secondary. And I'd love to see them get a true number 2 receiver. They've just been kind of filling in some guys across from Dez Bryant. Even as a Cowboys fan, I feel like he's one of the more overrated receivers in the league. They need someone else to go with him. He'll make plays in the red zone, and I like that, but he's not a reliable, consistent target.
It's weird. I am like on the fence with the Cowboys because, like, okay, you saw that Dak Prescott can't beat you when he doesn't have Zeke Elliott. I mean, when he doesn't have a running game, like, he can't sit back there and beat you. He couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. Dez Bryant's done. He's washed up. He's done. He doesn't think he is, which that's a shame. But, you know, you're done, dude. Like, you're not a true number 1 receiver anymore. So that's going to be an issue that they're going to have this offseason. Do they, what's the situation going to be with him?
You know who he really reminds me of?
Who's that?
When the Cowboys traded for Roy Williams, he's kind of developed like that long player that he's going to make plays in the red zone, around the end zone, but he's not. He just kind of is what he is. There's nothing wrong with it. He's a fine player, but he's not a true number 1 receiver.
He and it's a shame because he has such a huge ego, like a huge ego, that he would be better suited being a number 2 somewhere. If he was a number 2 receiver, he would probably do really well. Not getting the opposition's top cornerback on him. Like, he would probably do really well, but he's not going to do that. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to be the number 1. He wants to get number 1 money. So we'll see what happens with him. But I think that Elliott being suspended and being out for a big period of time, really showed teams, look, let's put 8 guys in the box, stop Elliott, and say, Dak, drop back and beat us consistently. I don't think he can. So I think the Cowboys next year, and then obviously with the defense, that's a whole big kind of question mark. You see it. I mean, when Sean Lee's in there, they're decent. When he's not in there, they're terrible. Right. And he's guaranteed to miss games every year. That's just the way he's another injury-prone player. So I think they're going to be about the same next year. I don't think they're going to make that. It depends on their schedule and how their schedule looks and the pieces they're going to add in free agency and the draft, obviously. But as we stand right now, I'd be inclined to say that they're not going to make the playoffs because I was really turned off with what I saw from Dak this year. I really was. Like, turning the ball over at an alarming rate, not being able to, when the running game's not there, not being able to be the guy and win games for the Cowboys. There wasn't a game this year that he won, that he was like, all right, guys, I got it. We're good. So that kind of, turned me off a little bit, but,
But I feel more comfortable that they'll have that consistent running game next year. They won't have to rely on Alfred Morris.
They have to. They have to have it. Yeah. And they have to have it. You as a Cowboys fan, you need to hope that they do have it, that Zeke does come back next year and just get back to his rookie way and just kill it. Because in order for that offense to have success, that's how it has to work.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yep, no argument there at all. If for some reason he's not what he was before or anything like that, or if he gets suspended again for something else, it'll be tough for the Cowboys. But as long as he's there, I feel confident this is still a solid team. I don't see them at the top of the NFC or anything like that, like they were 2 years ago. But still a solid team. So we'll move from there to who we both thought would actually have a winning season, although we were kind of down on them. The Giants seemed like they had a decent roster coming into the year, and they were terrible. They were terrible. All of the injuries, all of the just being the Giants and not being very good, and Eli Manning turning over the ball, and their nonsense with starting Geno Smith. They're a team, I think they'll rebound a little bit because they have some good pieces there on offense. I like Sterling Shepard. I like Odell Beckham. I like Evan Ingram. I think Eli Manning's still a decent quarterback. He'll turn the ball over a lot. One of the worst at doing that. But he's still all right. He can get those guys the ball, and they can rely on that. Their defense really took a step back. Former first-round pick Eli Apple was terrible. Every single time I watched him, he was just getting beat. I know he got benched at one point. He's just they are very ugly in the secondary especially, but across that defense. So they've got to make some moves, but I think they'll be better than 3 wins next year.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think they'll definitely be better than 3 wins. The injuries, I mean, they weren't going to be good to begin with, I don't think. I think they definitely overachieved 2 years ago. But, I mean, the injuries are the reason they only won 3 games, plus the head coaching situation. But, I mean, you had like what you saw from Evan Ingram. He'll obviously be a very good player going forward. Beckham will be back. Sterling Shepard's back. The defense, I think, again, overachieved 2 years ago. I think they'll be okay, but they won't be as good as people think they're going to be. The quarterback situation is what they got to get figured out. They got to get it figured out. I mean, new head coach Pat Shurmur said he thinks Eli has years left, plural. I mean, that tells me he thinks he's going to play another 3 years or so. If that's the case, I mean, are they going to draft and stash? They're going to draft one of them quarterbacks, stash them, try to get them ready, and then when Eli's done, insert him, kind of a Rodgers Favre kind of thing. But it's going to be interesting to see what direction they go, because that's what they need to get solved is the quarterback position. And, were we wrong on our prediction? Yeah, to a degree, but there are a lot of people out there, Zach, that picked this team to go to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, there's, they were bad. They were really bad, dude.
Yeah. They were tough to watch.
And that running game. When you talk about Seattle's running game, their running game. I mean, their starting running back at one point was Orleans Darkwa.
For most of the season.
Great. That's going to scare anybody.
Yeah, they came into the season thinking it was going to be Paul Perkins. They went with Darkwa for a lot of the season. They didn't really – Shane Vereen was in the mix at one point. That running back spot there is definitely ugly. But it'll be interesting to see what Pat Shurmur can do with that team. And we'll move from there to the Redskins and their brand new quarterback they just traded for and gave a monster contract to Alex Smith. And this is a team, they just seem to, no matter what moves they make, be the exact same. Below average. Maybe one year they have a good year and are slightly above average or average. But this is just a weird team. They tried bringing in some different players. They tried bringing in Terrell Pryor. Did not work out at all. He's out of there. They've got – I like Jamison Crowder, but he needs someone across from him. Josh Doxson at the receiver position, he really stepped up this year. Former first-round pick. He looked better. One thing that's going to be huge for them, because I'm in the D.C. area. I've watched a lot of Redskins games this year, more than I ever have in the rest of my life. But Zach Brown's going to be a free agent there at the linebacker position. He is, in my opinion, right there at Josh Norman's level as the most important guys on their defense. He is just a playmaker. He's always around the ball. If they can't re-sign him, that defense is going to be a disaster. Josh Norman at the cornerback position is tough because you can only cover one side of the field. He locks down the receiver on that side of the field every single time, and they can still pick him apart on the other side. Zach Brown is huge for this team, and if they lose him, they're a disaster.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do lose him, because I think this organization is one of the worst run organizations in football, and has been since we were in middle school. Mm-hmm. Okay. Dan Snyder is a joke of an owner. You had Kirk Cousins, who was a pleasant surprise in the draft. Kirk Cousins is the type of player that teams pray for. Teams pray for players like him, where you didn't have to sell the farm. You didn't have to, trade up. You didn't, he was a mid-round pick that you got lucky on and turned into be a franchise guy. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, you didn't want to lock him up long-term and commit to him. And now he's gone. And now you're stuck with Alex Smith, who it's kind of a parallel move, if not a step back, in my opinion. And he's 30-plus years old. You committed to him for another 4 years. Okay, great. Then what do you do? Then what are you going to do? You're going to be a middle team. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have a middle draft pick. You're not going to have a top 5 pick in the next couple of years to where, you can get a quarterback. This team is if I was a Redskins fan, one of my good friends is a Redskins fan, and he just kind of he's a football fan like we are. I mean, he loves the Redskins like we love the Eagles and the Cowboys, and he's just at the point where he expects them to fuck up. And so that's kind of where they're at, with this whole situation. And they'll probably be just a middle team again next year.
I have zero disagreement with that. I expect them to be right around the middle, probably just below it. They find hilarious ways to lose games. That is the number one thing I learned about them watching them this past year. That just all kinds of disasters happen with turnovers late in games. I will never forget their onside kick that didn't even go 5 yards and straight out of bounds. Just a complete disaster. And it was like that almost every single week. They had some kind of weird special teams thing happen, some kind of late turnover, some kind of late penalty.
Remember that game against the Saints? The Saints game? How do you lose that game? You're up 11 with 4 minutes to go. How do you lose that game? And then you hang 30 points on the Vikings defense, yet you allow Case Keenum to come into your building and put up 38. Dude, you just yeah. Yeah. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, it's and I feel like a lot of the Redskins fans I know are the exact same way. They just have accepted it. They just embrace that it's going to be rough every single year. And any free agent they sign is not going to work out. So the last team in the division we'll get to here are the Eagles. I am kind of intimidated by this team moving forward. They are in the Super Bowl with their backup quarterback. Carson Wentz looked amazing. They're not really losing significant players moving forward. They have a good young core on both sides of the ball. this should be a good team for years to come. And like you mentioned with the coaching staff, they've been aggressive. They've done well when it comes to play calling. I just have no reason to doubt this team right now, even though I did coming into this season. They proved me wrong. And I like their team. As much as I hate to admit it, I like the team they've built moving forward, even beyond this Super Bowl run here.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it is win or lose on Sunday, Zach, you're encouraged by the direction the Eagles are moving in because, look, no one expected them to take this big of a step this year. No one expected Carson Wentz to be an MVP candidate this year. I mean, no one. No one did. I mean, it was this was the most enjoyable football season I've ever experienced, even more so than that 2004 team. That was fun to watch with Westbrook, McNabb, Owens. This year was just like I couldn't wait for Sundays. Like, it was great. And that's you expect it to be like that for years to come with the core group that they have locked in place, that their GM, Howie Roseman, has done a great job of extending these guys for the next there was one of their beat writers tweeted out, one of their best beat writers, his name is Ruben Frank, who's like one of my favorite follows on Twitter where I get majority of my Eagles information from, tweeted out that their main core of guys like, Wentz and Ertz and Jeffrey and, guys like that, even guys on the defense, Cox and Graham and Malcolm Jenkins, those core guys, I mean, they're signed through 2020. I mean, this team that they had this year, for the most part, with the exception of a few guys here and there, is going to be the team that's going to be out there next. Zach, they lose 2 starters next year if they don't re-sign them from free agency on both sides of the football. I mean, that's crazy. So, huge step forward, big surprise year for the Eagles. And let's see if they can surprise one more time and win the Super Bowl. But, crazy year, man. I mean, it's encouraging that Wentz took such a big step forward. I mean, that dude's good, dude. I mean, that dude's real good, and he's gonna be one of the barring something crazy, like barring him having a what's that term we talked about on our trip up to what was that called? The yips.
The yips.
unless he gets the yips and just forgets how to play football, you expect him to be a face of the NFL for the next decade plus. So, things are looking good for the Eagles right now, and it's exciting times.
True on the looking good. Not exciting times for the Cowboys. They got the Eagles ahead of them now.
Yeah. It sets up fun battles that are going. I mean, if the Cowboys get back to kind of where they were 2 years ago, and Prescott, shakes off this, sophomore slump. I mean, that sets up a pretty fun battle the next, decade if it continues to be like that.
Yeah, and I feel like we've missed that the last couple of years with some of the battles the Eagles and Cowboys have had in previous years to really kind of develop that rivalry and develop my hatred for the Eagles. So we'll head to the NFC North, where we'll actually start with one of your best calls, the Vikings to win their division. That was something you were very set on, their defense being good. We both liked the combination that they had Dalvin Cook at the running back position. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for him because of his injury, even though he started the season so well. But that's one of the things they were able to accomplish in their 13-win season from this past year. They have that huge question mark at quarterback, what they'll do with Sam Bradford, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, all being free agents. They've got most of the same team coming back. Dalvin Cook will be there at running back, even though they'll most likely lose Jerick McKinnon in free agency, who they used a lot throughout the season. But that's still a positive for them to get Dalvin Cook back there, even losing someone else. Their defense is supposed to be back. Such a great defense that carried them through most of the year until they kind of got torched there in the NFC Championship by the Eagles. So this is a team very reliant on what happens in that quarterback position to say what's going to happen with them moving forward. I'm very concerned. I would not be surprised at all if they end up giving a contract to Case Keenum. We've seen that a lot with Joe Flacco being the number one example of a team that has success to give the quarterback a big contract and just kind of are stuck where they are. And I feel like if they do that, this is kind of their peak. And over the next couple of years, while Case Keenum's their starter, they're kind of fighting to get back there, but never quite able to get to the NFC Championship game or maybe even win a playoff game or two. So that's the huge, huge question mark on this Vikings team on what's going to happen to them moving forward, what they can do with that quarterback position.
Yeah, and if they can get that quarterback position figured out, I mean, this is a team that has tremendous upside. I mean, the defense is fantastic, like we talked about. Skill position, I mean, all of a sudden their skill position is looking really nice with Diggs and one of my favorite players in the NFL, Adam Thielen, who has really come into his own. And, I mean, the Pro Bowl this year, I mean, what a great player he's been. Kyle Rudolph's a nice little compliment at tight end. He'll give you production. And then you get Dalvin Cook in the running game, and you hope he can stay healthy. That was kind of the concern coming out of college was his health. Hopefully he can stay healthy. If I was the Vikings, I probably – and it's unfortunate because he's probably going to want a big deal or bigger deal than you'd want to give him. But if he'd be okay with taking, quote-unquote, like a hometown discount, if Case Keenum was, like, okay with – we'll give you a nice contract. We're not going to give you anything outrageous. We'll give you a nice deal. Stay with us. You had a year in the system. You played well. If I was them, I think that's the direction I would head in, just because every other direction's kind of gloomy. Like, you're probably not going to get Cousins. Drafting a quarterback, that sets you back. The roster's meant to win now. Bradford, hell no. Bridgewater, hell no. Now with the injury he had. I probably would go Keenum, just not at a large number. But this is a roster that's built to win now.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. I think one thing that hurts them is there's a lot of teams that need a quarterback. And I think that leads to Case Keenum getting some kind of big contract that they either have to match or have to let him go. And I think in an ideal situation, it'd be kind of like Ryan Fitzpatrick with the Jets a couple years ago, where he had a big season, kind of like Keenum, except not nearly to that level. And then he just couldn't find a team that wanted him to pay the money he wanted and went back to the Jets after that. I just don't see that scenario playing out with especially a team like the Browns that have a lot of money to throw around and not many people interested in going there, that they could make some of these lower-end quarterbacks a big offer to come in, kind of like we saw with Mike Glennon on the Bears last year. And that could really drive up the price of someone like Keenum. They could hurt the Vikings on their attempts to re-sign him. So from there, we'll go to the Packers, who usually are at the top of this division, but were really hurt by Aaron Rodgers' injury this year and their terrible, terrible, terrible defense. That's something you questioned before the season even started. I know their defense has been rough for a while, and they haven't really done anything about it. It'll be interesting to see if Jordy Nelson's able to bounce back after a rough year with Aaron Rodgers being back. But there's a huge question mark on that defense. They've got to make a lot of changes to be able to be towards the top of that division. But like we talked about with that Vikings team, if anything goes wrong at the quarterback position, the Packers are the most likely to reclaim this division moving forward.
I don't know if it's a popular opinion, but I'll say it anyway. I think the Packers are wasting Aaron Rodgers. You have a Super Bowl, which was – what year was that? 2012? 11? Chris, I don't even remember. I know it was against the Steelers. I can't remember how long ago that was.
I don't remember.
It was one of his. It was early in his career, though. And he has some weapons around him as far as the receivers go. The running game, though, since he's been there, has been so up and down, mostly down. And the defense, they just continue to just neglect and hope that these journeyman guys that they bring in and they can, plug and stop the gap. And it doesn't work. And they maybe they're moving in the right direction now because they got a new GM in place this year. But I just get the sense they're wasting Aaron Rodgers. And with a guy that talented who's one of the better quarterbacks to ever play, to only have one – well, and even to only have been to one Super Bowl. It'd be different if they got to another one and, like, they lost or something to the Patriots or something to the Steelers, something like that. But, I mean, you only been to one. Now, luckily you won it. But a guy as talented as Rodgers to only have been to one Super Bowl so far, what a waste. I just feel like they're wasting him.
Yeah, I can see that as well. I didn't quite think of it to that extreme terminology of them wasting him, but yeah, they definitely set the rest of the team up poorly for a while now without having much on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, and having some offensive line struggles.
Think of how good they could be, man. I mean, like, he carries that team. I mean, Zach, think of how bad this team was this year when he wasn't in the lineup. I mean, they were like, they almost lost to the Browns. They needed a fucking miracle to beat the Browns. And this guy with this pretty much the same team took them to the NFC Championship game 2 years ago against the Falcons. I mean, they're just – if I was a Packers fan, that's how I'd look at it. I'd say, we're wasting this guy. We need to figure out a way to get into Super Bowl contention again.
And they were on pace to make the playoffs when he was there and struggled to win any games at all once he wasn't, when he was out. So they've got to make some moves to build around him a little bit better and set them up. But just the fact of him being there is going to pretty well ensure that they'll be battling at the top of the division.
Yep, that's it. You hit the nail right on the head. Yep.
So from there, we'll go to the consistently disappointing Detroit Lions, who were able to win 9 games this past season. Not good enough to make them in the playoffs. I thought it was funny that before the season in our podcast, your direct quote was, "The Lions always eventually find a way to screw it up." And that's exactly what they did. They fulfilled that prediction perfectly. They still have no running game. They tried various people there. They're fine at receiver, but no, like, star receivers. Their defense is all right. They have some decent players, but it's like that all around. Same thing with Matthew Stafford at quarterback. He's fine. He's a good quarterback, but not what's going to put him ahead. Like, this is a team I feel like they need to make some kind of big move or they need to rebuild. They're just like that in-between team that can never quite take that step forward.
It's so funny because the Lions are like that. The Lions are like the NFC version of the Dolphins. Like, it's like, oh, they have a pretty nice little roster. Like, they can make some noise, and then they don't. You know, and Stafford, who is the highest paid player in the league right now, who is a good player. I like Matthew Stafford. I think you can win with Matthew Stafford. They just ask him to do too much. I mean, one stat that I still can't get my head around is that the last time that the Detroit Lions had a 100-yard rusher in a game, it was Reggie Bush. You know what the date was? It was November 28th of 2013. I mean, think about that. Like, you couldn't even get one of your running backs to rip off an 80-yard run, and then all he needs is 20 more. Like, that's mind-boggling to me.
Right.
Like, mind-boggling. Like, it's almost 5 years. That's crazy, man. That is crazy. Like, they have to get that figured out and give him a compliment. Give
Stafford.
Thank you, Stafford. You got to give Stafford some help. It's crazy. Just another organization that I don't understand the way they do things. One of their big things, and you talked about it actually in one of our off the radar podcast that we did the one week a month or so ago. was they really screw up in the draft. Remember we talked about the
Oh, yeah.
receivers they drafted? That was a long time ago. But still, things really haven't changed. I mean, they've really swung and missed in the draft. I mean, Brandon Pettigrew and Eric Ebron, and I mean, just some of these names that they're just space. Like, they're not playmakers. They're not impact players. So, yeah, they'll probably just continue to let everyone down.
Yeah, and the last team in the division is a team I think could come for the Lions spot there and push the Lions down farther. But the Bears finished this season with 5 wins. They had Mitch Trubisky there at quarterback. Their 2 running backs really stood out as their top offensive weapons with Tariq Cohen and Jordan Howard. They'll have them back. They have Matt Nagy as the new coach there. So hopefully they're able to take a step forward. They just have nothing at the receiver position. So they've got to get something. They had Cam Meredith miss most of the season, or miss the entire season with an injury. Kevin White played very early on and then had yet another season-ending injury. I don't really see him becoming anything. This is 3 years in a row, hasn't done anything. They've got to do something to bring in some kind of decent receiver there to take another step forward. But it's a team that has some young pieces. Even in some of the games they lost, they were in the game. They were close towards the end. They had the overtime game against the Steelers that they were able to beat a team like that. They had some close games against a playoff team like the Falcons. They nearly beat. This is a team I expect to continue making strides forward. I don't think it's going to be a huge turnaround like we saw it with Jacksonville or the Rams or the Eagles this past year, but I think we see them move forward somewhat next year and closer to 500.
Yeah, and it's going to all depend on Trubisky, obviously. Let's see what kind of, step forward he can take. But you're right. They definitely were moving in the right direction with winning 5 games this year, which is maybe more than people thought, and gave some teams a battle and were able to upset some teams, like you said, the Steelers. So I think they're moving in the right direction. I would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll be interesting to see if they can challenge the Lions there. I know it's for 3rd place in the division.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah. That's the next move up there. I don't think the Lions challenge for the top. I don't think the Bears will be quite as bad as they were this year, and they pick up some of those close wins. So we'll hit our last division here with the NFC South, which produced 3 playoff teams this past season. So some good teams there. We'll start off with the most disagreed we were on any team in the NFL this past season heading into the season. I thought the Falcons would be a 7-win team after their Super Bowl appearance and not make the playoffs. I had them as 3rd in the division. You thought they'd be an 11-win team, make it to the NFC Championship. Clearly disagreed. They kind of fell in between there. They were 3rd in the division, like I had said, but they did make the playoffs. They even won a game there. Matt Ryan did regress. He was not as good as their Super Bowl. They made their Super Bowl appearance. But they're coming back very, very similar next year. I think you can expect something similar, that they're kind of right on the verge of a wild card berth and kind of the top of the division. I don't really see any of these teams taking big steps forward. I think it's still going to be a battle of those kind of top 3 playoff teams towards the top of the division with the Falcons, Panthers, and Saints.
Yeah, Atlanta's just they're strange because they have talent, but I thought coaching this year kind of held them back. Like, they didn't get Julio involved near as much as they should have. Like,
and he was actually healthy.
Like, right. And I get, like, teams take your best player away. I get that. But, like, as a coaching staff, that's your job, is to get the ball into his hands. Figure out a way to get the ball into his hands. And, I thought the defense played pretty well this year as a whole. It just came down to Matt Ryan. And I got it right, the fact that they made the playoffs, but you got it right in the fact that you thought Matt Ryan was going to take a step back, which he did tremendously. So it was kind of both of our predictions kind of went hand in hand. So, which Matt Ryan do we get next year is the question. Does Matt Ryan give us another lackluster year, or does he? I mean, he's not going to give us the Matt Ryan he gave us 2 years ago. That was just. I mean, clearly that's not going to happen. He was just in a zone for, and it happens. Or does he improve and take a step forward? That's going to be the question, and that's going to ultimately determine how good the Falcons are next year.
Yeah, and they have another season with both their running backs, Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, before Tevin Coleman hits free agency the year after, which could be very interesting if he becomes a number one running back elsewhere and what they do to fill that kind of role. So we'll go from there to a team we thought were going to be just behind the first place winner of the division, which we will get to. But the Saints, we both had them as a winning team, which they were. We both had them as a 9-win team. They won 11, so they were slightly better than that. Drew Brees is a free agent. I think it's fully expected he'll re-sign there. He's been there. He took them to the Super Bowl. He's been there for what seems like forever, even though it was his second team in the NFL. They have a much improved defense this past year from how terrible it was in previous years. It was solid. It still has some rooms to improve there. And then they got great performances from their running backs. I know one of my good calls player-wise was Mark Ingram coming into this year. I felt he was very undervalued and had a good season. Alvin Kamara was incredible throughout the season. He's going to be a star player here in this league. So they have some great pieces that they'll continue moving forward with. And then Michael Thomas, a receiver. Fantastic player. Fantastic. I'd love to see them add a better tight end. We saw Josh Hill make some plays in the playoffs. He's kind of fine, but they were at their best when they had that Jimmy Graham type player making plays there, and that's something I feel like they definitely miss at this point. Although they filled it in a little bit with the 2 quality running backs that they use.
And I think that does make up for it. And I think this offseason, clearly, since they kind of found that diamond in the rough in Kamara, and I think they're probably happy with the offensive side of the football. I think they'll probably focus on trying to continue to improve that defense, which ideally is probably the situation they should, address. Look, defense took a step forward this year, and they think they need to continue to have it take a step forward. And, Marshawn Lattimore, rookie corner, they drafted last year. He had a great year, and they just need to continue to add pieces like that, whether it's through the draft or whether it's through free agency. But, yeah, Breeze will be back, and, the Saints will probably be right there again next year.
I'd expect that as well, that the Saints will be battling towards the top of the division. They're always very consistent in being that similar team that they bring back. And I expect the defense to continue to improve as they add through the draft and potentially free agency. So the next team, we were very down on the Panthers going into this season. They kind of outplayed our expectations. We both had them at 6 wins. They ended up with 11, and we're able to get into the playoffs there. This Panthers team needs some help at receiver. Devin Funchess is really the only receiver they have. He's fine. He's solid. I don't see him as a number 1. They've got to fill in something there. I know they lost Curtis Samuel for the year. That he's kind of that running back / receiver role that I think he'll get a lot of that action if they don't pick up somebody else. But he's still very much unproven. This past year was his rookie season. He'll be heading into his second season. The running game also had its struggles. Christian McCaffrey did well catching it out of the backfield. He was decent on the ground, but they had a lot of games they just had to rely too much on Cam Newton. And that's when we see them struggle a lot of times, when they just don't have that running game at all. And the defense has taken some steps back over the last couple of years. They are not where they've been at. So this Panthers team still has a lot of question marks. I see them dropping off heading into next year. I think this 11-win season, it was very hard fought. They did earn it towards the end, but I just don't see them matching this again unless they make some major moves on defense and at the receiver position.
Yeah, I think they overachieved. I think we'll both obviously agree on that they definitely overachieved. And look, I say it to the cows come home. I just am not a believer in Cam Newton. I think that MVP Super Bowl run year he had was just it was a facade, and I'm stand by that till the day I die. But the roster just isn't that good. And you're right, they rely on Cam way too much, and they need. I mean, if you take his rushing yards away and his rushing stats away, their rushing attack was god awful. So,
Yeah.
And I mean, they had some nice wins this year. I mean, they were able to beat New England. They were able to beat Minnesota. So I mean, they were able to win some marquee games. But going forward, they definitely have some areas to address. And unless they really address them in a big way, I think they're going to take a step back next year.
Yeah, that's what I'd expect. And then we'll finish with another one of our worst calls. We both thought the Buccaneers would be a double-digit win team. They did not perform that way at all. Jameis Winston did not take the step forward we expected. They came away with a 5-win season. Just very rough. They didn't get anything from the running back position. That was a mess, even though heading into the season, there was all kinds of talk about Doug Martin's in the best shape of his life. All these things about how good he's going to be once he comes off that suspension. Not true. By the end of the season, they had deactivated him. He was benched. He wasn't playing at all. I'd be amazed if he comes back. I almost guarantee that he doesn't. They'll go somewhere else with the running back position. And that'll be interesting to see what they do. If they address that through the draft, if they try and bring someone else in, like a Carlos Hyde, who might be a decent fit there. And I expect O.J. Howard to get some more play or some more opportunities coming up here, both because he's more experienced and Cameron Brate's going to be a free agent here. If someone else wants to pay him a big amount of money, he could easily move on from Tampa after they invested a first-round pick in O.J. Howard. I don't think they'd want to do the same thing we saw the Bears do with quarterbacks at the tight end position and have a high-paid backup tight end.
Yeah, the Bucs, they're probably the biggest disappointment in the NFC, and the Raiders were the biggest disappointment in the AFC. And I guess you could say that the Hard Knocks jinx continues. They were on Hard Knocks last year, the HBO show, and it seems like every year whoever's on Hard Knocks just has a bad year. And I think it came down to this team was reading their own headlines. I really believe that. And I think this team thought they were better than they really were, didn't have to work as hard, and got complacent. And I think, Winston, he needs to stop turning the ball over. He turns the ball over way too much. And I remember watching Hard Knocks, and I love Hard Knocks. It's a fantastic show. That was one thing that Dirk Cutter, literally after every practice, in the middle of every practice, he's like, Jameis, you got to stop forcing things. You got to stop turning the ball over. That's going to hurt us in the season. Lo and behold, it hurt him in the season. And, that to me is the biggest part of Tampa Bay is what are they going to get from Jameis Winston going forward? Because he's definitely got talent. And, maybe we saw too with Tampa Bay, the biggest free agent bust in Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, jeez, I thought he could have, and this offense could have done really big things with Evans on the outside. You had the speedster, Deshaun. He was irrelevant. I mean, he was absolutely irrelevant. So, and the running game wasn't anything special. So, they definitely have some decisions to make in the offseason. But I mean, I think they're definitely poised to be able to take a step forward. It's just kind of hindered on Jameis and hindered on adding some more pieces in the right areas.
Yeah, I think they'll take a step forward too, but I think it's a lot slower than what we expected.
Right. Yep. I totally agree with that. That's well said.
Yeah. All right. Well, we went through every single team in the entire NFL, what they did this past season, some of the expectations coming up.
Who's doing that? I mean, who's doing that? Who out there is going to do that? Who out there is going to do that for you? Who out there is going to go through every single team. And not only did we go through every single team, we did it twice. We did it in the beginning of the year, previewing them, and we did it at the end of the year, recapping their season and looking forward a little bit to next season. I mean, there's no one out there doing that. I mean, come on. So I loved it. I thought that was great and insightful, and I hope everyone enjoyed it because that's what we bring you here. We're going to bring you information. We stressed that when we started it, and we stress it now. You listen to our show, you're going to get info. You're not just going to get a bunch of bullshit that you get on some of the other shows, and especially some of the national shows out there.
Yeah, definitely the goal to make sure everyone learns. They have an idea what's going on here, and they get excited for the sports we talk about here. I know it's something we're excited about. We got the Super Bowl coming up here. We'll have the off season after that, some free agency, some draft in the NFL. We got the NBA going strong, coming up on All-Star weekend in a little bit here. So all kinds of excitement going on at this time of year. And then college basketball as well. That's going strong as well here in the winter.
Yeah, absolutely. And as this show has kind of been focused around the NFL, obviously, since we've gotten started. It's Zach and I obviously are going to figure out what direction we're going to go from here. I'm sure we'll definitely have some good things in the works and figure out kind of what direction we want to lay the show out. Whether it's more NBA, whether it's college, whether it's and I'm sure it'll be a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
We'll definitely dip our toe into a little bit of everything, but it's been fun, and it's only going to, I think, continue to be fun.
Absolutely. Yep, that's definitely the goal, to have fun ourselves and to entertain all of our listeners as well.
Absolutely.
So it's been a good show here. Been a long show, but hope you all enjoyed and have a great rest of your week.
Go Birds.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback. As we continue to build this platform with our podcast, it's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.